What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate today. Welcome to my channel and welcome to my Week 14 takeaways reaction video. I always do one of these. I give you the 5 biggest things that I learned, or at least some things that I took away or that I saw from the past week of college football action. And let me tell you what, fine people, rivalry week did not disappoint. There were so many great games, so much to unpack from this week. And it all led into conference championship week. We're going to preview every single conference championship game, all 9 conference championship games. We'll have a preview prediction video out on my channel. Hopefully, you'll see 2 or 3 coming out later today. But before we dive on into any of that, I just want to say thank you so much for helping to support the channel, for helping to support me in any way that you do. If you want to help support the channel, well, you can really just interact with it in any way you can. It all helps to support what I do here on YouTube. 2 biggest ways you can do so are doing what you're doing right now and just simply watching the video. And if you haven't done so already, hit the subscribe button and ring the bell, especially if you're as big of a college football nerd as I am. You can also like, comment, share, and follow me on any social media you'd like. It's at Tailgate829. Hopefully, pretty soon. I know I've said this for quite some time now, but hopefully we'll start to be posting a little bit more on some social media so you guys can see what else I do outside of YouTube, because I would like you all to see it. But without further ado, let's dive on in. Let's talk about Week 14 takeaways. And man, rivalry week did not disappoint. I mean, let's go through a couple of these games, right? Tennessee, Vanderbilt, fantastic game. Ohio State, Michigan, sloppy, but fantastic game. South Carolina, Clemson, really good defensive brawl. Notre Dame, USC trying to outscore each other. Notre Dame ended up pulling out at the end. The upset win in the Dome. Syracuse able to pull off the win against Miami. You had Missouri and Arkansas be a phenomenal game. Texas and Texas A&M, what a good game that was. Kansas State and Iowa State, really, really good game. Georgia and Georgia Tech. Oh my goodness, what a game that was on Friday night. Memphis and Tulane on Thursday. That in itself was a really good game. Rivalry week did not disappoint. And I just listed off matchups with ranked teams. There are a lot more matchups that you could go through with unranked teams and say, wow, that was a really, really good game. But it was overshadowed by all of this. Alabama, Auburn, Florida, Florida State, North Carolina, North Carolina State, Arizona, Arizona State, and of course, the one in the middle of your screen between Ohio State and Michigan. The brawls, the fights, the flag planting, the fines, the suspensions. And no matter what your point of view is, no matter if you're someone that says it's rivalry week, you know, this is something where they're going to show their passion. Of course, fights are going to happen. Or whether you're someone on the other side of the fence that says, man, this is a bad look for college football. No one should be fighting. You have 60 minutes to beat the crap out of each other on the football field. There's no room for all this extracurricular stuff after the game. Granted, this Auburn-Alabama thing happened during the game, but most of the other things you saw this week happened after the game. There was flag planting and fights, and in the case of Ohio State-Michigan, I don't know about any other game, but in the case of Ohio State-Michigan, there was pepper spray. What are we doing? Seriously, what are we doing? This, no matter what way you lean, this is an awful look for college football. I agree a little bit more. In fact, I actually agree a whole lot more with the side on with the camp on one side of the fence that says there's no room for this in sports. Yes, it's a rivalry. Yes, it's intense. Yes, you want to beat your opponent, but you have 60 minutes on the football field to beat the ever-living crap out of each other and to trash talk and to throw cheap shots and to throw sort of like chop blocks and all of this stuff that is ill and frowned upon. You have 60 minutes to do that on the football field, and this is not just an Ohio State-Michigan issue because we saw it all over. And Texas A&M, I know, got into a little bit of a scuffle. Notre Dame, USC, there were a ton of punches and cheap shots being thrown throughout that game by both teams. And I think the most notable one that I don't have on here is Missouri and Arkansas. And of course, there are others that I am missing on here as well. There probably are some in the group of 5 realm that I'm not even too sure of happening. I just know these 5 were the biggest ones. This is awful. And this is a problem because it comes with flag planting. And you heard Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt say on the broadcast an unsportsmanlike gesture. Now, flag planting, especially with the rivalry week stuff, is not something new, right? You saw Oklahoma, when Baker Mayfield went on the road and beat Ohio State in Columbus. They tried to plant the flag on that same field, and I'm just using Ohio State as an example. It happens all over, right? Flag planting is nothing new, especially when it comes to rivalry games. And I hear the one camp that says that. I hear the people that say, like, look, it's nothing new. Flag planting is going to happen, whatever. But if you plant the flag, you're expecting a fight. What do you want the other team to do? Like, if you're Michigan and you're going to plant that flag to say, yeah, we own this land, we stake this claim, we beat you, here's to that, boom, and they try to plant the flag into the field, do they expect Ohio State players, coaches, assistant coaches, fans to just sit back and say, oh, man, look at them planting the flag on the field. Oh, we'll get them next year. Nope, you're asking for a fight. You are. You are asking for a fight, and I think this is an awful look for college football, for college sports. And the pepper spray thing in Ohio State, Michigan, that's not an Ohio State thing. That's not a Michigan thing. That is one or two, maybe three. I've heard of two police officers' decision to do something drastic and it backfiring completely. And I think there's even an investigation into the whole pepper spray thing, right? And this can definitely be a conversation, a more lengthy conversation that we can have in a separate video. If you guys would like to see me do that and get on my soapbox a little bit more, I feel like I'm kind of already on it right now. There's no place for this in sports anywhere. There's no place for this in the NBA, the NHL, the NFL, and especially not with the pageantry tradition and love of college football. There is no place for any of this crap that you see down below. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's shameful. Nobody does their job here. Nobody. Not the teams that planted the flags, not the teams that fought back. Nobody did their job. But if you plant the flag, you're going to ask for a fight back. So maybe this is the conversation we could have later on in a separate video, but I've talked about this one long enough, so we are going to move on to some of my other like big takeaways. I did really want to talk about that, and maybe I'll expand on it in another video because it's been a lot more than just those fights. You've got the fans throwing stuff on the field, and anyway, we'll dive on into it in another video. Let's talk about the college football playoff race, shall we? Because despite everything that happened this rivalry weekend, off the field is what I'm going to call it, and I'm talking about the fights and everything. But despite all of that, we saw a lot of very good games, and we saw the college football playoff picture get shaken up. Ohio State, who thought they were going to lose that game to Michigan? We'll talk more about that later. Miami going down, they now could be out of the college football playoff conversation. They could be sitting behind teams like Alabama, South Carolina, and we'll talk more about that in just a little bit. But the playoff race is thickening. It is thickening a whole lot. You see, this is actually the latest AP poll that you see right down here. Of course, the reason I don't have the college football playoff poll up there is it hasn't come out as of recording this video. So this is the latest up-to-date AP poll. But what do you do with Ohio State and Tennessee if you're the college football playoff committee? That likely is now going to be a first-round game, and they have to decide who gets home field advantage in that. If SMU were to lose the ACC championship or the ACC championship game to the Clemson Tigers, Clemson's obviously in. What do you do with a team like the SMU Mustangs? Arizona State and Iowa State are playing for a Big 12 title game. That is going to be very exciting. They're going to get a spot in the college football playoff, but where do they get seated? And every other conversation that you can have is just going to be so fascinating to see what the committee does this week and after championship week to see where they rank teams, especially those that are playing in their conference championship games that may end up losing, but I'll talk more about that here in just a minute. But for number 3, the at-large bids, and I'm mainly specifically talking about that final bid because you can kind of look across college football, and I think there are probably at least 8 teams that have secured themselves in a college football playoff spot. I think Oregon, Penn State, Notre Dame, Georgia, Texas, Ohio State, Tennessee, and Indiana have secured themselves a college football playoff spot. SMU, they probably have done so as well, and maybe there's one other team I'm missing. I'm actually going to go back for 1 second to look. Oregon, Texas, Penn State, Notre Dame, Georgia, Tennessee, Ohio State, Indiana, Boise State, as long as they win the Mountain West, have secured themselves a spot. But again, that last at-large bid, I think it's between Alabama, I think it's between South Carolina, and I think it's between the Miami Hurricanes. I think one of these 3 teams is going to get that last bid in the college football playoff. Now, it could be 2. Because what happens if SMU loses that ACC game to Clemson and they lose it bad and they get blown out? Maybe you see both South Carolina and Alabama throw in. And this is why it's going to be really interesting to see where the committee is going to be ranking teams, because Alabama's been ahead of the pack for so long, but South Carolina looks really impressive. What do you do with Miami, who was sitting at number 6 in the AP poll? They fell all the way down to number 14. Do they fall that low, if not even lower, in the committee's rankings coming out later on tonight as of recording this video? It's just going to be so fascinating to watch and see what the last at-large bid is going to look like. If you want my opinion, you'll see my top 25 come out later today. I think it's going to end up being the Alabama Crimson Tide, just the way teams have been ranked and the way resumes look. And obviously, Alabama's got that head-to-head win over South Carolina. I think a lot of people would like to see South Carolina in the college football playoff because they're one of the hottest teams, if not the hottest team in the nation right now. But Alabama's got that win against them on the football field. Granted, it was a 2-point win. It was a sloppy win for Bama, but it's still a win nonetheless. And I think that head-to-head result is going to matter. I don't think you can put Miami in the college football playoff. Their resume just doesn't compare to that of Alabama or South Carolina. But again, that's my 2 cents. It's going to be really, really interesting conversation to have nonetheless. Here is one takeaway that I have that I think is already pretty widely known, but I'm just going to go ahead and say this right now. No matter what 2 teams lose and win both of these games, first of all, SEC. What are we doing? You see that Big Ten graphic that was put together over there? Come on, you got to get a lot better about making your graphics. That Big Ten graphic, awesome, elite, I love it. This SEC graphic down here, kind of plain, simple, effective, it works, but it doesn't compare, in my opinion, to what the Big Ten graphic did over there. Okay. Anyway, I think the losers of both of these games, no matter what happens, unless they end up getting blown out, I'll throw that one caveat in there, unless they happen to get blown out, I think the losers of these games are going to end up hosting first-round games. Now, the exception to that might be Georgia as a 3-loss team. Maybe you see Ohio State and Tennessee jump over Georgia, but again, it depends on where the committee is going to be ranking these teams tonight, right? Without a shadow of a doubt, the loser of Oregon and Penn State is going to host a first-round game, and the winner probably going to end up getting that number 1 seed unless Texas happens to beat Georgia and Penn State happens to beat Oregon. Again, there's a whole bunch of scenarios that we're probably going to end up going through on Friday just to kind of see some of the nuances with the college football playoff and things of that nature. But plain and simple, I think the loser of these 2 games are going to end up hosting a first-round college football playoff game. You probably already have Notre Dame, who's going to be the host site for a college football playoff game. And then more likely than not, these are going to be your other top 5 teams. Oregon's going to stay at number 1. Penn State will probably be at number 3. And then Texas will be at 2. Georgia will probably be at 5 with Notre Dame at 4. And I just really don't see them falling out of a top 8 spot. Even if it's Georgia at 5, who is probably going to be the lowest ranked team here, even if they lose that SEC championship game, I don't see them falling all the way to 9. I don't see them falling below Ohio State and Tennessee and someone else who's going to happen to host a first round playoff game, or is in the conversation at least, to host a first-round college football playoff game. I think these are going to be 2 very, very fascinating games. I think the way that I have my schedule shaping out, both of these games and both of these prediction videos are set to come out on a Wednesday. Yes, they are. So not today, but tomorrow, you'll see preview predictions for both of these games coming up there on my channel. But this is going to be a very interesting conference championship picture because, I mean, you take a look outside of these 2 games, Arizona State and Iowa State, that's going to be a play-in game for basically a college football playoff play-in game. Whoever wins that game is going to end up making the college football playoff. SMU and Clemson, if SMU loses that game, obviously Clemson gets in. Do you keep SMU in over the likes of Alabama and South Carolina and Miami? And I think that they do. So conference championship week is going to get very, very interesting. But we have to talk about one game in particular and one head coach in particular here in this video. But my biggest takeaway and the biggest win that anybody had last week was Michigan going on the road on the backs of Dominic Zavada and that amazing defense stopping the Ohio State run Michigan was able to pull off that upset against my Ohio State Buckeyes. As much as it pains me to say it, you have to give props to the Michigan Wolverines. They made this game sloppy. They waited for Ohio State to make mistakes, and they took advantage when they needed to. Michigan had a perfect game plan going into it. They were going to make it sloppy. They were going to run the ball. And even without Colston Loveland and Will Johnson, they were still able to have some success in the receiving game. No, it wasn't monstrous, but Ohio State was not really able to get a whole lot of pressure. Davis Warren did complete some big-time throws, especially later on in that game, and this Buckeye defense was phenomenal. It gave Ohio State a chance to win this game at every single point. The interception at the goal line from Jack Sawyer, a couple of the stops that Buckeye defense made, especially the stop at the goal line earlier in that game, was absolutely phenomenal. But the Ohio State offense did not get it done. Ryan Day didn't get it done. Chip Kelly didn't get it done. And now you really have to start that question about Ryan Day. Not that it already hasn't been started before by some Ohio State fans that already saw him lose 3 straight before this game happened this past Saturday and said, yeah, he's not the answer. Well, now it's been 4 straight. And Ryan Day just didn't seem to have that leadership. He doesn't seem to have that killer instinct that a lot of Buckeye fans are looking for. And you saw guys like Jim Tressel and Urban Meyer, Woody Hayes, Earl Bruce, and a lot of other Buckeye coaching legends have that. And it is the reason why Ryan Day probably can't get over the Michigan hump right now. And I think it's a big mental game that Ryan Day is having to deal with at this point in his career as well. As a college football fan, I think Ohio State should keep Ryan Day because I think he's a phenomenal head coach. As a Buckeye fan, I'm okay with whatever they decide to do with Ryan Day. And honestly, if you take my Buckeye fandom out of it and you take a look at this from a pure college football standpoint, I can make the case for keeping or letting go of Ryan Day. He beats everybody else. He is 66-10, 66-9, something like that as the head coach of Ohio State. That is a phenomenal record. It's one of the best win percentages over recent history, but he can't win the game that matters to most fans that like to represent themselves in scarlet and gray, and that is the game against Michigan, and he is yet to bring home a national title. He's been very, very close. He was in the national championship game. If he would have gotten over that hump and Ohio State would have won that game against Georgia, they would have been the 2022 national champions, and we probably are having a lot different conversation about Ryan Day today, but the fact of the matter is he's been close, but it hasn't happened. He's also been close against Michigan. He is right there. He's a play or two away from beating that team up north, and he still can't get it done. As a Buckeye fan, I'm okay with whatever they decide to do, but also as a college football fan, you have to look back and kind of have a little concern for Ryan Day and his mental side of things, right? What if Ryan Day just decides I'm fed up with all of this stuff happening around me, with all the negative feedback and backlash? And I'm not saying it's not deserved, but where does Ohio State and Ryan Day go from here? This is the best roster in college football from a pure talent standpoint. They spent so much money on this roster to go win a national championship. They're still going to be playing for a national championship. They will be a representative in the college football playoff. But if Ryan Day doesn't win the national championship, doesn't make a run, gets blown out in the first round of the college football playoff, what do? This is the conversation that we probably will have in another video. Chip Kelly picked a bad day to call one of the worst games, if not the worst game of his entire coaching career. As an offensive coordinator, as a head coach, as whatever, he picked a very, very bad day, and it is probably not fun. I can speak from experience to be wearing scarlet and gray right now, watching the Maize and Blue try to plant their flag and watch them roll into Columbus and pick out that win with a roster that I'll say is half as talented, just from a pure talent standpoint, than what Ohio State fielded on Saturday. But I give Michigan props. That was a very, very good performance from them. They did what they needed to do. They made it sloppy. They pulled out that win. Sharon Moore, as the head coach of Michigan, I know was getting a lot of skepticism this year. I think he's going to do phenomenal. The bigger question, though, is what do you do with the head coach that likes to represent himself with that block O? And you even heard him say after the game, he just kind of doesn't know. He doesn't really know where Ohio State goes from here. Well, here's where you go from here, Ryan. You go prepared to go win a national championship, or try to at least, and you go prepare for whoever you may play in the college football playoff. That's going to do it for my Week 14 takeaways. Kind of got on my soapbox a little bit today, but hey, that's okay. Maybe I can get on my soapbox a little bit more in a couple of videos that may very well be coming out on Friday. But we'll have a preview prediction video for every single conference championship, including some that will come out later today. But before we do all that, you'll see my new top 25. Remember to play hard but tailgate harder. See you guys in the next video. Goodbye.